Shana Tova, everybody. We had thought the second day, Rosh Hashanah, anybody going to be here? We don't know. Middle of the week, COVID. And of course, as a lot of people predicted, many of you are here on the second day because you thought that the first day was going to be too crowded. I appreciate that very much, that you're opting to come in now. Just as many seats, and just to be able to see in person is really beautiful. And so thank you for being here. So yesterday, of course, was sort of a State of the Union, State of B'nai Aviv address. I appreciated your patience in going through it all. An important message, I think, for all of us. But of course, lo midrash ha'ikar ela ma'aseh. Words are one thing, but action is really what the essence of these holidays are about. And we talk about words like tshuva, repentance, and we use words like tzedakah, and we use words, right, like gemilut chasadim, and our version of ourselves that we see in the mirror today is supposed to be something different that we see over the course of the next 10 days of repentance, and certainly throughout the year until we get to 5783. And so this morning I want to focus in on some practical application. How can we actually change ourselves between today and, of course, when we congregate again, please God, all of us together in this room, 1,700 people in 5783. And so I begin with this, a large shul, and the rabbi's about to retire. He's about to retire after many years, and a search for a replacement has begun. And the search committee, they sift through dozens and dozens of resumes, and they settle on two very different types of candidates. The first one, organized, proper, precise in his language to the point that he wrote down every word to be delivered in a sermon or a lecture. The other, charismatic, spontaneous, sociable, disorganized, never knew exactly what was going to come out of his mouth. And both were exceedingly talented, but very different rabbinic styles. And the two were invited for Shabbat. They're put up in a local inn, walking distance from the shul, and as it happens, they find themselves in adjacent rooms sharing a wall. It's Friday afternoon. The spontaneous, sociable rabbi, well, he's very relaxed. He's got a basic idea of his sermon for the morning, and he lies down in his bed, and his hands are crossed behind his head, and his eyes are closed, and he's thinking about the ideas he may or may not decide to share when suddenly, on the other side of the wall, he hears the other candidate, and he's practicing an entirely prepared sermon. Every word already thought out and written, and it's brilliant. Not only is it substantive, not only is it relevant, but the rabbi's practicing inflection, pace, when to pause and wait for the laugh. And the spontaneous rabbi is astounded at the content, the delivery, and so he leaps off of his bed, he grabs a notepad and pen, and he subsequently writes down every single word he hears, along with the nuances of delivery. He rips off the entire Devar Torah. Next morning, the two arrive at shul. The spontaneous rabbi immediately runs over to the head of the search committee, and he says, "Look, if you don't mind, I'd like to speak first." Right? His plan to cut off the competition of the past, it's foolproof. Such a deliberate, precise orator could never be extemporaneously effective, and so the position would be his. And sure enough, the spontaneous rabbi gets up in front of the shul, and he begins. And the congregation is captivated instantly, astounded at his erudition. And when he finishes, they break Shabbat protocol, they stand and applaud. And he glances over at the other rabbi. Jaw on the floor, white as a ghost. This organized, precise rabbi, he realizes that not only has he lost the position, but when he stands up with no sermon, unprepared, fumbling for words, his future career would be ruined as well. And so, head down, deflated, the rabbi slowly walks up towards the bima, and suddenly, he has an idea. And he stares out at a sanctuary full of interviewers and critics, and he begins. There are two types of rabbis, two types of people. There's the mechadesh, one who makes new. This type of person is creative, inspiring, flowing with ideas. This type of person connects to others with his or her peh, mouth, always projecting outward. But then there's the makshiv, the listener, The one who doesn't just have presence, but is present. Present, especially when you need them to be there. This type of person connects to others with the ozen, the ear, always receptive. I, continues the rabbi, strive to be a makshiv, a listener, one who pays attention and to whom you can unburden your troubles, your stresses, your concerns, and to display my ability to listen intently, I'm going to do my best to repeat back to you the beautiful sermon we've all just heard. And he does so. After all, he wrote it. Same inflection, same nuance, and of course the applause is even more rabid with the second rabbi. And he's hired immediately. Why is he hired? The art of listening, the ability to be receptive to others, is always going to be more desirable than the art of talking, the ability to project thoughts and opinions onto other people. And so the question I pose today is whether the art of listening has been eliminated from modern discourse. After all, much of what we say, right, it's on Facebook, Twitter. It's in the form of a text message or an email. How has the revolution of communication impacted the art of listening? Now, my friends, we're all aware that communication is very different today than it was a generation ago. And though it may seem as if the vitriol, the judgment, the polarization, the anger, the cynicism, the blame embedded in modern discourse is a product maybe of pandemic, vaccine, masks, go outside, don't go outside. Or going back further, maybe it's a product of a presidential election. Trump is good, Trump is bad. It's not. The toxicity of language has seeped into how we talk about everything and to everyone, our spouses, our children, our friends, our colleagues, and it's happened slowly. Not since 2016. Communication is transformed. It is mutated. A Darwinian shift. And it's reached a point where face-to-face communication has begun to really mirror the patterns and the characteristics of online communication, even if we don't really recognize it. That was way back, 1969. Marshall McLuhan prophetically warned, societies are shaped more by the nature of the media with which people communicate than by the content of communication. The medium is the message, he famously claimed. Now, he was worried about the medium of his day. It was television. How would it shape his society? Now, for us, what the post or what the text says is secondary to the fact that we said it in a post or a text. Our medium, well, it can be faceless, anonymous, unfiltered, and above all, one-sided. Our medium has made intolerance, contempt, judgment all the more possible, rendered the art of listening an anachronism. And each of us is keenly aware that this has infiltrated the way we speak, even to those we care about most. 100% of married couples fight, even though none of them are in this room. 100%. We used to listen to understand. More often than not, we now listen only to reply. That's not listening. It's simply waiting to talk. We used to engage in dialogue, which required attention, patience, respect of opinion. Now we engage in debate. And the goal of debate, regardless of subject, whether it's about face masks or whether it's about where to go on a family vacation, the goal of a debate is to prove we are right, not that we're listening. So if societies are shaped by the media with which people communicate, then the very thing that we despise about the other news network or the offensive Facebook thread, well, guess what? It's also influenced the way we speak to those closest to us, and we may not even realize it. So in my very first High Holy Days here, my very first sermon from this bima, I suggested 3 words a person should never say. Anybody remember them? Oh, I should have given that sermon again. Would have saved me so much time. I can't wait. Subject was wishing away time. The elevator, my mom remembers. Thank you, Mom. The elevator, you're very right. So a decade later, I want to suggest 3 more words. Practical application. 3 more words a person should refrain from saying in conversation. And these aren't only words. They're dispositions, what we call in Hebrew, midot. Consciously omitting these 3 words, eliminating these midot, dispositions from our character, may help each of us reclaim the art of listening and make 5782 a year defined by a rebirth of healthy conversation. Now we learn the 2,000-year-old mission in Pirkei Avot. Eino nichnas letoch divrei chavero. A wise person does not enter into another's speech. Now, what does that mean? Don't cut people off when they're talking. Cutting someone off when they're talking invalidates their thoughts and opinions. Disagreeing, invalidating, not the same. It's okay to say to someone, I have a different opinion. It's not okay to say, your opinion is not worthy of being heard. When we neglect the art of listening, when we neglect the human need to be heard, and more importantly, to being worthy of being heard, it's not good. Who wants to feel they aren't worth listening to? And while not cutting someone off mid-conversation seems like an obvious faux pas, we all do it. And we all do it the same way. The first midah can be found on page 462. You don't have to do it, I'll read it to you. 462. We're going to read it again and again and again over the course of the next 10 days. Our God and God of our ancestors, may our prayers come before you. May you not ignore our pleas. We are neither so arrogant nor so stubborn as to declare that we are righteous and have not sinned. Aval anachnu chatanu, which translates as, but we have sinned. Now, according to Maimonides, the end of that paragraph constitutes the very essence of what we're going to do for the next 10 days. The very essence of the confessional prayer we repeat ad nauseum until the end of Yom Kippur. Aval anachnu chatanu, but we have sinned. But it begs the question, wouldn't it have been sufficient to just express the essential nature of the 10 days with repentance with just one word? Chatanu, we sinned. What's with the aval? Former head of Yeshiva University, Norman Lamb, the great rabbi, he answers that perhaps Maimonides' intention was to draw our attention to that extra word, aval, but. As if to say that our most significant transgressions consist of that one word. Aval chatanu doesn't mean, but we have sinned. It means, with the word aval, with the word but, we've sinned. Word number 1. I'm not referring to the conjunction but. That's not my first example. The excuse but, the excuse aval. Rabbi Lamb suggests aval is the loophole in the law of decency. That the psychology of aval, the psychology of using the word but, the disposition that emerges from this tiny word allows us to hurt other people, almost with impunity, all while maintaining the fiction of innocence and purity. The whole thing derives from the story of Joseph, from Yosef. His brothers, you can remember the story. The brothers had wronged Yosef. They sold him into slavery, and many years later, they come before the viceroy of Egypt. They beg for food, but the brothers, they don't recognize him as Joseph. And when this viceroy demanded of them that they then sacrifice their own youngest brother, they suddenly begin to think back to what they had done to Yosef. And they look at one another, and they say, Aval ashamim anachnu. Aval, but we are guilty. What they really were saying was our guilt was one of aval. Our guilt was using that word, that loophole. We knew we were abandoning our brother, but we weren't murdering him. We knew we were tearing him away from his family, but maybe he's going to be better off with a new start and not amongst brothers who hate him. We knew we would be breaking our old father's heart, but he's got 11 sons. The other ones will console him. We knew that Joseph's dreams, his ambitions, they were a result of this uninhibited childish imagination and bravado, but we got impatient of it. He was too immature. Now, according to this confession that we repeat over and over and over again, we're guilty of aval. That word but, and the rabbis, they've remarked that this word that we all abuse is lishma deromahu. It's the language of the Romans. In other words, this self-righteous justification, rationalizing all wrongdoing, but I didn't mean it that way. It's the language of the Romans. In other words, when we use it like this, that word aval, it has no rightful place in the vocabulary of Judaism. The word aval, but when we use it as a moral loophole, has no business in the language of Jewish life. That's an amazing concept. And I bet every single one of us this year has had a conversation that escalated from a heated conversation into a full-blown linguistic war because of that word, but almost every person we inadvertently made feel less than, invalidated, unworthy of being heard was because we used that three-letter dagger in our speech, or worse, we allowed that word to become a disposition. Aval chatanu. We have sinned with the word but. Word number 2, teachers. Any teachers in here? We have back and forth. You have some teachers in here. The biggest nudnik in the class, the child who manages to get under our skin, causing us to second-guess ourselves whether or not we're being effective. Is it the mischievous child? Probably not. We respect the mischievous child. After all, most of us were the mischievous child. The hyperactive child? No, that's okay too. Kirov, I was the hyperactive child. I'm hyperactive right now. Totally fine. That's not the nudnik. Who's the nudnik? I prepared a class. I begin with a story. When Abraham was a little boy, he ventured into the idol shop of his father. And then suddenly, from somewhere in the back of the classroom, a voice blurts out, "I already know that one! He smashes the idols!" That's an intrusion, an impatient intrusion. I already know that one! Much more damaging and hurtful when we display it as an adult. A spouse or a friend, a parent excitedly begins to tell us something. We nichnas lemilim, we slice into their words, their enthusiasm to share with us by saying, I already heard that. I already saw that. I already did that. The second word we use to inflict a sense of unworthiness, and we do it all the time, we don't even realize it. Unworthiness of being heard is the word already. In Hebrew, it's kvar. And that's also a midah, disposition. The midah of kvar, it suggests we're uninterested in listening. Whether we say it out loud or to ourselves in our mind, it gives ourselves permission to check out of the conversation, opt out of listening. Why? Because whatever's being said, it's redundant, it's irrelevant. We've already heard it. There's no purpose for it. The word already is the ultimate conversation stopper. Teachers in the room will testify. Nothing's more frustrating, nothing's more dejecting than a child who exclaims, "I know this already. I've heard the story already." The word already, it invalidates the worth of the speaker, and hearing something a second time, it makes it less important to us, the listener, but not less important to the person excitedly sharing it with us for the first time. How many of us have come home from work to an excited child, runs up to us and says, "I got an A on my math test"? And we reply, "Yeah, I already heard from your mom, and I'm so proud of you." Sounds harmless, doesn't it? How many times this year did we squash another's excitement with the sentence, "Oh, yeah, I already saw it on Facebook"? I was doing it every day until I started writing the sermon. Word number 3, the reason we're here. And not in Jerusalem, in the Beit HaMikdash. The Roman Empire, 2,000 years ago, they burned Jerusalem to the ground, but the catalyst for this catastrophic trauma was something different. Aval mikdash sheni shayu oskim b'torah u'mitzvot u'b'gimilut chasadim itnei ma acharav. Why, asked the Talmud? The second temple is destroyed in 70 CE. The Jews, they were studying Torah, they were performing mitzvot, they were engaging in acts of loving kindness and charity just like we do. Why was it destroyed? Mipnei shaita bo sinat chinam. Sinat chinam. It was destroyed because of baseless hatred amongst Jews. And what exactly was this baseless hatred? Our sages suggest simply systemic spread of excessive righteousness. Each individual believed to be in sole possession of the truth, suffering from a compulsion to correct the erroneous thinking and behavior of those of differing opinions, and to enlighten them as to why they are wrong. What does this look like? Torah. Most volatile argument in the Torah. Korach. He's flanked by 250 followers. he approaches Moshe and Aaron and says, Rav lechem, you have gone too far. Umadu tisainu al kahal. Why do you raise yourselves above God's congregation? And then Moses quickly retorts, Rav lechem, no, it's you. You've gone too far. You want the priesthood too. And then Korach snaps right back. No, it's not enough that you brought us from a land flowing with milk and honey to have us die out here in the wilderness. You want a lord over us. And then it's so clear when we use that pronoun you as a weapon of accusation, it closes our ears. Closes our ears to any alternative opinions. And in many ways, it absolves us of any accountability. You rushed us out of the house. That's why we forgot the present. I've never said that. I'm the rusher. You were always so easy on the kids. Of course they grew up to be entitled. You were so strict with the kids. Of course they grew up to resent us. Now don't confuse this accusatory you in confrontational conversation with tochacha, which is rebuke. Tochacha, rebuke, foundational principle in Torah. Using the pronoun you for constructive criticism, that's the gateway to healthy relationships. The Midrash claims, tochachat mevia lidei ahava. Without tochacha, without constructive criticism, there can be no love and there can be no peace. But then the Talmud does something even further. It cautions that the difference between the accusatory you, why are you like this, to tochacha, constructive criticism, is simple. It's timing. Listen to this. כשהוא מדמה שישמע לו, אבל אם יודע בו שלא ישמע לו, אסור להוכיחו. When you use you for constructive rebuke, it can only be done when we have reason to believe that the individual will listen to us. If we know for sure that it will be received poorly, that the individual will pay no attention to our words or even become enraged, we got to keep our mouths closed, stay silent until the appropriate time. Clearly something that we all do, right? Now, sometimes the accusatory you, it undermines the thoughts, the ideas of others, even when we're trying to be helpful. Imagine this scenario. We have a friend, works at a company. Company's going through a very tough financial situation, layoffs. Very stressful time for our friend. And the friend confides in us. Listen, finances are so tight. Not even high performers like me are going to get bonuses this year. I'm working harder than ever before, and I'm doing it for less money. And then our reply, I get it. You should find a new job that appreciates you. Seems harmless, right? Was our response indicative of being a good listener? I get it. You should find a new job that appreciates you. That's actually a scenario from a standardized assessment on listening. And in all parallel cases, use of you, it's a veiled form of advice. It's not real advice. Because what we're telling our friend is, we know better. It's a backhanded accusation that our friend knows less than us about what he or she should do. We're directing, not listening. You, go get a better job. What if our response was simply, have you thought of better options? Have you thought of different options? Have you thought of other possible options? Aval, but, the moral loophole. I didn't mean it that way. But I didn't mean it that way. Doesn't matter, it's in the air. Kvar, already, the conversation stopper. I already heard it from your dad. The accusatory you, the pronoun of absolution and blame. You should, you did, because of you. They've been used by each and every one of us. Nichnes letoch divrei viro, in order to cut someone else's speech off. Now, if we aspire to be a makshiv, if we want to be true listeners, if we want to be one who connects to others with the ozen, the ear, always receptive, we may want to take these words out of our vocabulary and the dispositions out of our character. Listening is the greatest gift we can give to another human being. When we neglect the art of listening, we neglect the human need to be heard, and more importantly, to be deemed worthy of being heard. Who wants to feel they're not worthy of being listened to? That their thoughts, their opinions, their stories are unimportant? I don't want to feel that way. My guess is you don't want to feel that way. And on these holy days of repentance, we must pledge to not make others feel that way, but already in you. 3 words to be mindful of in 5782. So when we come back here in 5783, we can claim to be better listeners and better people. I wish you all a Shana Tova.